I'll take care of my part. She's too clueless to notice anything. But are you sure you're ready on your end? Everything's set here. This will go perfectly. My husband, Mike, said with a sinister smile I'd never seen before. He seemed to be on a video call with his sister, Kate. The tone of their conversation felt unsettling, so I froze in the hallway, choosing to listen rather than enter the living room. Mike hadn't realized I was home yet. As I strained to hear their exchange, my heart raced. What I overheard made me tremble with fear. Mike and Kate were plotting together, planning what sounded like an elaborate crime. I have to get out of here. If I stay, something terrible is going to happen. Shaken to my core, I gathered my courage and quietly headed for the front door, careful not to make a sound. Without delay, I left the house and drove straight to my father's home, seeking his help. How dare he mess with my precious daughter? I'll make sure he regrets it. My father's stern expression and his ominous words might scare some people. To strangers, he might come off as a rough or dangerous man. But in truth, my father is. My name is Anne. I've been married to Mike, a company CEO, for 10 years now. Sadly, we've been unable to have children, but our marriage has remained strong regardless. I work as a nurse and have been promoted to head nurse thanks to my hard work. However, with great responsibility comes a demanding workload, and Mike and I often live like ships passing in the night. Despite his own busy schedule as a CEO, Mike has always shown understanding for the challenges of my rotating day and night shifts. Don't overdo it. I'm always worried about you, Anne. Thanks, Mike. Sorry for leaning on you so much. My hospital is large, and the number of patients we handle is overwhelming. For years, my life has been a routine of work, exhaustion, and sleep. Even with his packed schedule, Mike has always stepped up to help with housework, doing things like cleaning and laundry when I couldn't. I couldn't thank him enough for his kindness. Mike and I have lived this way, respecting and supporting each other, for years. His thoughtful gestures and caring nature made him a husband I was proud of. But there was one issue: Mike's family. As the eldest son, Mike has a younger sister named Kate. From the very first meeting, I didn't have a good impression of Kate. She didn't hide her hostility toward me and often made snide or sarcastic remarks. "So you're Mike's wife? Wow, Mike, your taste in women is terrible. Couldn't you have found someone better than this plain woman?" At our first family gathering, Kate insulted me as a plain woman, leaving me stunned. Fortunately, Mike quickly scolded her with a stern tone, but that didn't stop her. Every time we met, she continued to treat me with hostility. When I once asked why she hated me so much, she bluntly said, "I just don't like you." It seemed we were simply incompatible. Although I grew to strongly dislike her because of her constant jabs, I kept my distance and tried to tolerate her for Mike's sake. Kate lived with her mother, Jane, at their family home. Mike's father had passed away from illness a few years before we got married. "I'm taking care of Mom. That's why you can work so freely. Taking care of Mom is supposed to be your responsibility, not mine." Kate often threw this at me as if I owed her, but from an outsider's perspective, the care Jane received didn't seem adequate. Jane had suffered a fall at home years ago, injuring her legs and back, which left her unable to walk on her own. Although she could manage short trips to the bathroom with a walker, she needed assistance for nearly everything else. Kate claimed to be taking care of her, but Jane was left in what could only be described as neglect. Jane's room was often filled with stale air, as if it hadn't been ventilated in weeks. She lay bedridden in filthy sheets, surrounded by scattered trash on the floor. Whenever I visited, I'd try to clean up the mess, but Kate would stop me, saying, "Don't do things without permission." Kate's caregiving was sloppy at best. Most of Jane's needs were left to visiting caregivers, who came a few times a week. Despite offering advice on how to improve Jane's living conditions, Kate refused to listen. When I could no longer stand by, I tried to take matters into my own hands. But Kate strongly resisted, making it impossible to help Jane. "Hey, Mike, can't we do something about Jane's care?" I approached Mike, hoping we could address the situation. "Kate's handling Mom's care. If we interfere, it'll only upset her. Let's give it some time." Mike's gentle nature sometimes made him indecisive. Even though he acknowledged my concerns, he didn't want to confront Kate. But as a nurse, I couldn't ignore the neglect Jane endured. I offered advice to Kate multiple times, but it only made her furious. And then, something unbelievable happened. "Kate, we've been getting calls about you. Multiple calls, actually. Do you know why?" One day, at work, I was unexpectedly called in by the head nurse. She explained that the hospital had received numerous complaints about me. The claims stemmed from online rumors stating, "A daughter of a dangerous man is working here." My name had been specifically mentioned in the posts, which had alarmed some hospital clients. "Head nurse, I have no idea what this is about, but these accusations are completely false." I denied the claims outright, assuring her they were baseless. She accepted my explanation for the time being, but the defamatory posts continued. Soon, whispers and rumors about me spread among my colleagues, and I started hearing hurtful comments. Who could possibly be behind such lies? I realized this situation could affect my job, so I secretly hired a lawyer to uncover the person responsible for the online defamation. It didn't take long to find the culprit. "Why did you post those lies?" I confronted Kate directly. When the lawyer revealed the name of the person behind the posts, my suspicions were confirmed. The detailed content of the posts included information only a family member could know. Thinking back, Kate had only met my father once at our wedding. Despite my father being a government employee and an upstanding man, Kate had repeatedly remarked on his stern appearance, saying, "He looks dangerous." "What are you talking about? Stop accusing me of things I didn't do," Kate said with feigned innocence. "Don't bother pretending. We know you're the one who spread those lies about me online. If you keep it up, I'll have no choice but to report you to the police." "Eck, you're so dramatic. It was just a harmless prank." "Fine, I'll stop." Kate smirked, showing no remorse. While the post ceased after that confrontation, the damage had already been done. The rumors persisted, and I was still labeled as someone with dangerous family connections. Even though my boss and colleagues understood the truth, explaining the situation to patients was much harder. As a result, I was reassigned to duties that didn't involve direct patient care. Initially, I intended to keep quiet about the ordeal, hoping to restore my reputation at work over time. But with the impact it had on my career, I couldn't stay silent any longer. I decided to tell Mike about Kate's actions. At first, Mike couldn't believe it. "Kate would never do something like that," he said. But when I showed him the legal documents confirming her involvement, he had no choice but to accept the truth. That idiot. Why would she do this? Mike was furious. He called Kate to his home and confronted her. "Don't you ever pull something like this again," he scolded her harshly. Even Kate, who was always cold toward me, couldn't defy her brother, and reluctantly apologized, saying, "I'm sorry." Seeing Mike stand up for me made me feel incredibly supported. Months passed after the incident, and I was finally able to return to my usual duties at work. "Everything's back to normal now," I thought. Work was going well. Mike remained as caring as ever, and life seemed peaceful again. But then, something strange happened. It all began with Mike's puzzling behavior. "And don't you think it's time to get rid of this shelf?" Mike suddenly said to me. He pointed to a shelf I'd been using since my single days. It wasn't expensive, and although it had scratches here and there, it was still functional. I couldn't understand why Mike brought it up so abruptly. "Why are you saying this out of the blue?" "Sure, it's old, but it still works fine. We've been in this apartment for a long time. It's getting a bit monotonous. I want to redecorate. Come on, let me buy you a new one." "All right, if you insist. You're acting strange, though." With that, Mike began gradually getting rid of my furniture. Not just the shelf, but also my dresser and desk. He claimed they were too old, and carted them away. Each time I objected, saying they're still usable, he would smile and reply, "I'll get you new ones." I wondered if he had suddenly gotten into feng shui or something. Since none of these items were particularly important to me, I decided to let him have his way. One day, after a night shift, I came home early in the morning and heard Mike's voice coming from the living room. He usually slept in late, so I was surprised to hear him up so early. I stopped in the hallway while he remained in the living room. Just as I was about to open the door, I froze. "And still at work? I'll handle things on my end." "Okay, then I'll leave tonight's matter to you, Kate." Mike spoke with a sinister smile I had never seen before. It sounded like he was on a video call with Kate. The tone of their conversation was unsettling, so I stayed quiet and listened from the hallway. "Do you think she'll notice?" "No way. She's too oblivious to figure it out. How about you? Are you ready?" "I'm all set. This will go perfectly." They started enthusiastically discussing a criminal plan. I shivered as I continued to eavesdrop. Mike and Kate were conspiring to carry out an elaborate crime. I need to get out. If I stay here, something terrible will happen. Realizing Mike's kindness had been a complete lie, I forced my trembling body to move, quietly making my way to the front door. I left the house and ran as fast as I could. It seemed Mike hadn't noticed. To stay safe, I rushed to my parents' house. Since I had called ahead, my dad was already waiting for me, despite the early hour. "Are you okay?" "Yay, Dad, thanks. I'm sorry for worrying you." "You have nothing to apologize for, and they're the ones who are wrong. How dare they mess with my daughter? I'll make them pay." My dad's intimidating appearance made his words sound ominous. If someone only knew him by his looks, they might believe the rumors Kate had spread. But my dad wasn't some dangerous person. He was a highly respected police detective. Though he retired a few years ago, I couldn't imagine a more reliable person to have on my side. After hearing my story, Dad seemed to revert to his old self, saying, "Leave it to me." He advised me to act as if nothing was wrong, and let Mike and Kate believe they were in control. If what I overheard was true, their plan was set to happen tonight. My father assured me that there was no immediate danger, and advised me to return to the house where Mike was waiting. "You're late. Didn't you say you'd be back by morning today?" Mike greeted me with his usual gentle smile. He looked like a completely different person compared to when he was discussing the plan with Kate. "Yeah, there was an emergency with a patient, and I couldn't leave right away." "I see. That must have been tough. Did you even get any sleep?" "I took a nap at the hospital." "I'll be fine, thank you." From every angle, he seemed like a caring husband worried about his wife's well-being. If I hadn't overheard that horrifying plan by chance, I would never have believed this man was capable of such a scheme. I tried to keep my thoughts hidden, maintaining the appearance of a clueless wife. "You're off work tonight, right?" "Yes, I am." "Why do you keep asking that?" Oh, right. I guess I've just been forgetful lately. Sorry about that. That day, Mike seemed restless. He kept asking over and over whether I would be home that night. He had taken the day off from work and stayed home, supposedly relaxing, but his eyes were constantly on me. It felt more like he was monitoring me. When night came, we moved to the bedroom to sleep. However, Mike repeatedly got out of bed, glaring at his smartphone with irritation. I pretended to sleep while observing his behavior. He seemed anxious, checking the clock frequently, and muttering under his breath, "What's taking so long?" Thinking I was asleep, he tried calling someone multiple times, growing increasingly frustrated when the calls wouldn't connect. It was clear that something had gone wrong with their plan. Mike had no idea I knew about the plan, and he cursed at the unresponsive phone. Then, suddenly, the doorbell rang loudly, despite it being the middle of the night. What now? At first, Mike ignored the doorbell, assuming it was a prank, but as it rang persistently, he had no choice but to respond. "Who is it?" "This is the police. We have a few questions to ask." "What? The police? I didn't do anything." "What's going on?" "The police." I immediately got up from bed, ending my act of sleeping, and moved to invite the police inside, seeing that Mike wasn't opening the door. "Hey, don't let them in without my permission. It could be something serious. Why are you so worried? Or do you have something to hide?" Mike averted his eyes when I asked that. When I opened the door, several police officers were standing there with a warrant for Mike's arrest. "You are under arrest on suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder." "What? That's absurd. I didn't do anything. This has to be a mistake." Mike shouted in denial of the arrest warrant's contents, but his face turned pale. It was clear he had a guilty conscience. Proving this, Mike tried to shove me aside and make a run for it. However, with multiple officers present, escape was impossible, and Mike was quickly restrained. The plan I had overheard between Mike and Kate was beyond belief. The siblings had conspired to attack Jane, their bedridden mother. Kate was supposed to carry out the attack, and when the police stormed Jane's home, they found Kate holding a knife, ready to harm her. If I hadn't provided the police with information beforehand, Jane's life would have been lost. Kate was arrested on the spot for attempted murder. That's why Mike's calls to Kate went unanswered. She had already been taken into custody. According to the police, Kate had confessed everything. She revealed that the plan had been orchestrated by Mike, leading to his arrest warrant. Here's how the full plan unfolded. After attacking Jane, Mike and Kate intended to frame me for the crime. The preparation Mike had made for this plan was to secretly move my personal belongings to Jane's house in advance. The furniture I had used was, of course, covered in my fingerprints. Mike pretended to dispose of these items, but had actually transported them to Jane's room. Inside the shelf, he placed Jane's banking cards, making it look as if I had attacked her for financial gain. Even the knife Kate planned to use had been stolen without my knowledge. It was one I had cherished and used for years. While this evidence alone wasn't enough to convict me, Mike planned to give a false statement claiming I was at home at the time of the crime. He and Kate had intended to provide alibis for each other. If I hadn't uncovered their plan in advance, I might have been wrongfully arrested for a crime I didn't commit. And the motive behind this heinous plan. It was Jane's inheritance and insurance money. My late father-in-law had run a company, and his wealth had been passed on to Jane. Mike's business had been in the red for years, struggling with financial troubles, and Kate's beauty salon was also failing. Desperation drove Mike to devise this plan. "Anne, you have to believe me. I could never come up with such a terrible plan. This has to be some mistake. There's no use making excuses. I overheard everything between you and Kate. You'll pay for betraying me. Betray you? That's impossible. We were such a happy couple. Indeed, Mike had always played the part of a good husband, but beneath the surface, he had been betraying me all along. Did you think I didn't know? You tried to frame me because I was in your way, didn't you? Oh, and I know your mistress is pregnant. When I said this coldly, Mike looked shocked. You knew. While working with a lawyer to address the defamation against me, I had also hired a private investigator. This was to gather evidence of Mike's affair. One day, I received a phone call at home from his mistress. She told me, I'm pregnant with Mike's child. Please leave him. At first, I couldn't believe it. I had trusted Mike completely. The thought of him cheating seemed impossible. But the investigator's findings confirmed the mistress's claims she was indeed carrying Mike's child. You thought you'd get Jane's fortune and pin the crime on me. Too bad things didn't go as planned. I taunted him, and Mike turned red with rage. Damn it. If you had just stayed out of the way, everything would have worked out. You ruined everything. The plan was sloppy. That's your fault. Though the plan was poorly thought out, it could have worked if I hadn't overheard their conversation. I was saved by my foresight, and by the fact that my father was a retired detective. After hearing my account, my father quickly contacted his former colleagues, setting the wheels in motion for Mike and Kate's arrests. Let me go. Get me a lawyer. This is a false arrest. Mike struggled to break free, but the police held him firmly, and he couldn't escape. Eventually, he gave up and became quiet, allowing the officers to lead him away in a police car. I've caused you so much trouble, Anne. I'm so sorry. When I met Jane, who had been placed under police protection, she immediately broke down in tears and apologized. Jane admitted that she had sensed for some time that her children might harm her, but she had kept her fears to herself, not wanting to burden anyone. I never imagined they would try to frame you for their crimes, Anne. It's not your fault, Jane. The ones to blame are Mike and Kate. Yes, Mike and Kate were undoubtedly the guilty ones. No matter how desperate their financial situation was, plotting to harm their own mother and frame an innocent spouse was beyond comprehension. More importantly, I'm sorry I couldn't help you sooner. From now on, please rely on me. Oh no, I can't impose on you after you've divorced Mike. I'll move into a care facility, so don't worry about me. I've been thinking about this for a while, Jane. I believe with the right rehabilitation, you could regain your ability to walk. Could you hold off on moving to a facility? I'll help you every step of the way. Let's work together. Kate had neglected Jane, refusing to take her to proper medical appointments, leaving her bedridden in a filthy room. But as a nurse, I had always believed Jane's condition could improve with proper care. I had tried to tell Kate this repeatedly, but she dismissed me, saying it was none of my business. Now, with no one to interfere, we could finally make progress. If you think so, Anne, I'll give rehab a try. Jane started attending rehab sessions at the hospital, and her condition steadily improved. It became clear that her prolonged immobility had worsened her symptoms. A year passed. And why don't we take a trip together? Looking through a travel magazine, Jane smiled as she made the suggestion. That sounds great. Where would you like to go? Let's enjoy some delicious food while we're at it. Jane had fully recovered and was now well enough to go on trips. It was clear that her previous immobility was due to the neglect she suffered under Kate's care. With proper treatment and early rehabilitation, Jane would never have ended up bedridden. After selling the family home, Jane moved into an assisted living apartment, where she now lived independently. With her health and spirit restored, she seemed to be thoroughly enjoying her newfound freedom. I used to spend all my time staring at that filthy ceiling in that house. I can't believe I've recovered so much. It's all thanks to you, and, truly, thank you. Jane always expresses her gratitude to me in this way. Hearing her thank me so often makes me feel a bit embarrassed, but knowing how far she's come from the helpless state she was in fills me with immense joy. Jane was always cheerful and energetic these days. If I hadn't uncovered Mike and Kate's plan, I would never have seen her like this. As for Mike's mistress, she once showed up at Jane's door, carrying a baby, claiming, "I've given you a grandchild, so give me money." Jane, however, coldly turned her away. It had already been determined that the child wasn't Mike's but another man's. Mike was such a fool to be deceived by a woman like that, Jane muttered in exasperation. From prison, Mike frequently sent letters. In them, he begged for forgiveness and expressed a desire to live with us after his release. But neither Jane nor I had any intention of forgiving him. We had moved far away from our old home, making it almost impossible for Mike or Kate to find us after their release. We allowed the letters to be delivered but never replied. Although both would eventually be released, we would never see them again. Jane occasionally asked me, "Are you planning to get married again?" To which I always replied with a laugh, "I don't need another man in my life." Mike's betrayal had left a deep scar, and I decided to focus entirely on my work instead of pursuing any romantic relationships. However, something completely unexpected happened to me. After moving and starting a new job at a general hospital, I was assigned to care for a male patient who later confessed he had fallen for me at first sight. After his discharge, he began pursuing me relentlessly. At first, I thought he was joking and dismissed him lightly, but it became clear he was serious, as he refused to give up, no matter how many times I turned him down. Eventually, he confessed his desire to date me with marriage in mind. Though I was hesitant and uncertain, I had to admit I was growing fond of him, which left me conflicted. After failing once, I don't think I could ever remarry. In my uncertainty, I turned to someone for advice. "You've been through so much because of Mike. I'm so sorry for what happened. But from what you've told me, he seems passionate and genuine. Why not give it a chance?" Jane's encouragement gave me the courage to consider the possibility of a relationship. I shared my past with him, my divorce, Mike's betrayal, and the pain it caused. He listened without hesitation and assured me that he was serious about building a life with me. And so I began dating him. He was the complete opposite of Mike, honest and sincere, with no hidden agenda. After introducing him to Jane at a family gathering, everyone, including Jane, agreed that he was the right person for me. Eventually, we held our wedding ceremony. Jane attended, and it was as if she were celebrating the marriage of her own daughter. She cried tears of joy throughout the day. Later, my husband and I welcomed a baby girl into our lives. Her birth brought immense happiness to everyone, my parents, his family, and Jane. The trauma of nearly being caught in a criminal conspiracy lingered for years, but I knew that my husband and daughter would help me heal and move forward.